Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to today's English Connects. Now, I'm sure you will notice I am supposed to be here with Imran Saifour from the Teaching Centre at the British Council, but unfortunately, he hasn't been able to join because of the electricity crisis in his building, I guess. So today it is just me and you listeners, you in the audience. So if you're watching, please say hello so I know that there's someone there, because my co-host, hi there Masum, great to have you with us. As I say, my co-host is not able to join me, so I need your help to talk to me about the subject today, which is, does IELTS teaching differ from teaching general English? So I would like to know your opinions. Are you teachers? Do you teach IELTS? Have you got experience of teaching exams? If so, please put your experiences in the chat. Is teaching for an exam different teaching for general English? I would love to know your opinion. Hi there, Shuvo. That's a great avatar that you have. So any teachers in the audience, please let me know your experiences. Is teaching IELTS different to teaching general English? Yes, Kamal. I am aware my colleague who should be joining me today, Imran Safir from British Council Teaching Centre, is unfortunately unable to join me. So let's get moving with this topic. Does teaching IELTS and exams differ from teaching general English? Well, in my experience, I think teaching for exams does differ significantly from teaching general English. But let's go into more details. Today we're talking about the IELTS test. So very briefly, put your ideas in the chat. What do you know about IELTS? And see if it matches with what I know. My name is Wendy Masum. My name is Wendy. So what do you know about IELTS? Well, let me tell you, the IELTS exam is taken by people that want to demonstrate their level of English. It is recognized in many different countries for visa reasons. If you are trying to take the IELTS exam for getting a visa, then you will be looking at taking the general English paper. Kamal Abu Nasser, thank you for your help. If you want to go to university, IELTS is widely accepted all around as an exam that demonstrates your ability. And the different universities will tell you what score you need to achieve. You can get anything between a 1 and a 9. And so one of the lovely things about IELTS is you can't really fail. You're always going to score. But how does the exam work? Well, as Kamal Abu Nasser says, you'd have 4 parts to the exam. You have reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So let's think back to the question for today's session. Does IELTS and exam teaching differ from teaching general English? Well, clearly, in this case, when we're teaching general English, we want our students to learn all these 4 skills, so there's overlap there. But what is different when we are teaching IELTS is how we structure our lessons. I think one of the important things to keep in mind as an IELTS teacher is that you want your students to understand and to know the exam. So when we are teaching the 4 skills, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, we also need to think about how those skills are tested in the exam. So understanding that listening comes first, making sure the students know the order in which the exam is taken. So thank you very much for this, Mahmoud. If anyone can tell me the rest of the order, I'll be happy to share that. So when we're teaching listening, what we want to do is think about the type of questions students will receive when they're sitting the exam. So a common question type is multiple choice. So in this case, we want to guide students not only in language, but also how does a multiple choice question test your ability of the language? So when you're doing a listening and you look at a multiple choice question, I want my learners to really understand that they are listening for information that isn't true compared to the information in the question. For example, when you have multiple choice, you will have a question start, and then you will have A, B, C, and D. Okay? And you need to be able to read those A, B, C, D options. And when you're listening, check, does this confirm the option or does this reject the option? Does it match or doesn't it match? So you're not only telling your students to listen out for the answer, but to listen for the wrong answers. You can eliminate options too. Now, Rifle Islam, this is a great question. And as teachers, we need to be able to understand and support students and understand what they're finding most difficult. And so for Rifle, you're saying time management is your problem. Right. Well, tell me, how long do you have for the reading exam? How many questions do you have? So, in the exam, you have got 40 questions. You have got 1 hour. The questions get more and more difficult, okay? When you are reading, you want to develop reading skills of skim, reading quickly, and then reading for detail. Different question types will enable you to answer questions more quickly. And this is something you should be aware of. As you're practicing reading papers, think about which questions are more difficult, which questions take more time. One of the questions is to match headings to paragraphs. This question I leave to the end because this is more challenging. You really need to know the detail. If there is a gap fill, so a section of text with information missing where I need to add words, I would do that first. Same with multiple choice. Then I come to the headings last. So understanding what questions I find more difficult, what the strategy is, what's the best technique to answer that question, and then trying my best to manage my time around it. You have got about 1 minute per question. This gives you time to read the text and answer the questions. So you need to work really fast. One of the very important things, though, is IELTS is a test of English. So if you're not generally at the level for the score that you want to achieve, then before you start spending all your time practicing for the exam, think, do I need to go and do a general English course just to improve my level? Because the way I teach IELTS will really focus on IELTS. Mahmoud, thank you for your point here too. You're saying that my speaking is very clear. Thank you, Donobat. But during the exam time, it is more difficult. So this is absolutely a result of me being an English teacher and teaching IELTS and also speaking very loudly. So when you do the IELTS exam, you will hear different listeners. You will hear different speakers, different accents. And this can make it really tricky. So what do you need to do? You need to improve your general English. And how can you do that? Well, there is the British Council Learn English website. This has got lots of different activities that you can do to develop your listening skills. Another website that I often use is called ello.org. This website, ELLO.org, has recordings of people from all over the world speaking in English. So this is a great way to train your ear to get used to the way that different people from different parts of the world speak English. And obviously, in a general English class, we want to do the same thing. We want people to hear speakers of English from Britain, America, South America, Australia, Canada, but also from places like Japan, India, Bangladesh. We want people to be able to communicate across boundaries because this exam is trying to support you to take part in university study or live in a country in another part of the world. So being able to communicate with people from different nationalities is important, both for IELTS and also in general English. Do I think that practicing Cambridge is enough to make a good score in IELTS? This is a really good point, a really good question. Let me think. If you think about exams that you teach in Bangladesh, if you think about exams that you study for business and you think, well, does that work for mathematics? I would say if you want the best chance of achieving a good IELTS score, you should practice IELTS. However, the Cambridge exam, a different set of exams, does have different types of questions which will help you to focus on your accuracy. So it really, really looks at words that go together, words that collocate. And this can be really helpful for IELTS when you come to the writing part and you need different vocabulary and synonyms to express what you think when you are writing an essay, or you're writing a letter to a friend. You need to make sure you have the register right. And Cambridge materials can really support with that. But if you are studying for IELTS and you're teaching people for the IELTS exam, I strongly recommend using IELTS-based materials. It will make a big difference. So, other questions that I had for Imran. What would a perfect IELTS course look like? Well, the perfect IELTS course is going to have a balance between exam practice and general English. If you don't have the general English, then you are not going to demonstrate that you have a good level or a good score in the exam itself. So making sure that the course, when you are planning your lessons, that you are still teaching lots of English and getting vocabulary development, grammar awareness, listening, reading, speaking practice, but also practicing those IELTS type questions. Something else I recommend is Ielts Practice. Much of that can be self-study. If you trust your students not to cheat and you trust them to go home and do their work in timed circumstances, then you can give them access to listenings, you can give them reading papers and writing tasks, which then you can give feedback on in the class. Students can actually do a lot of exam practice independently too. Another part that I think is very important is to have good tips for your students. So just like Rafil asked about how to manage your time, thinking about ensuring the students are aware of the exam, making sure students know some basic information and ideas like read the question and follow the instructions. Now, I know that that seems like common sense, and who would not follow the instructions? Well, I can tell you, I have done test exams where I have not followed the instructions and got some really bad marks. So it's very easy in a test situation to overlook key words in the instructions, to write 3 words when you need to write only 2 or 1 word. Because of the stress, your brain's working so fast. So telling your students to make sure they read the instructions, practice breathing techniques to remain calm when you're in the exam. Help your students. In a general English class, I would never teach breathing. But in IELTS, I start to talk about stress because exams are very stressful. Other advice? Well, for the reading and listening, you need to have correct spelling. So generally, when I'm in a general English class, I really focus on fluency and getting people talking and writing. And I want people to practice using the language as much as possible. In IELTS, I put more emphasis, more weight on things like spelling. If a student can't spell, I will tell them to go home and learn a list of words and then test themselves. And there are fun ways you can do this, like using Quizlet, things like that, getting students to create their own to make sure that they are developing the accuracy so they can really achieve. Okay. Now, Faridul Islam, absolutely. How long does it take to prepare for IELTS? Well, how long is a piece of string and what score do you want to get? I think for IELTS, there is a general understanding that if you want to get a level higher than where you are at, according to the Common European Framework of Languages, then you need to spend 200 hours, okay? If you are at the right level, so if you are studying as an advanced learner, this means you are C1 in the CEFR framework, then you need to spend, I would say, 20 to 30 hours really getting to grips with the exam itself. Now, I'm going to let you into a secret. I actually took the IELTS exam when I was in my 20s, many years ago, when I first started teaching as part of my training. And I came away with a 6.5. I didn't take the whole exam. I just took the parts that would be more difficult. So the listening, the reading, and the writing. And the reason why my score was lower was because I didn't understand the exam. And this is something that I think is my advice that I give to all of my students. Understanding how the exam tests your skills is very important. Understanding that using different words shows your vocabulary. Understanding that taking a sentence in the passive and changing it to active shows your awareness of grammar. Okay, so here we've got someone suffering in Ielts grammar. Again, this is about practice, Raphael. Can I recommend that you go to the British Council Learn English website? There are lots of resources there and courses that are free access that you can practice with. Or if you have the resource, you can always take a language course. Talk to other people in your community that are trying to take the exam as well, and try to study together. Social learning is really powerful, but there are lots of resources that you can access online too. How can I improve listening? Well, I think there is a few things that you can do. Get involved with things you enjoy. We have such a lot of resources online. Listen to things that you know about. So for me, right now, I live in the Netherlands and I'm learning Dutch, and I love yoga. So I go to yoga classes and I hear language that I know because I know yoga. I know the positions. So I understand the words for the different parts of the body because it connects with things that I already know in my own language and that I understand. And this gives me confidence and motivation. It makes me feel good. As well as doing what you enjoy, listening to music you like, watching YouTube videos, watching TED Talks. The other thing that I recommend is some dedicated practice to learning English and developing listening skills. In the listening test itself, my key tip would be to remember that the questions are in order. So if you're listening and you're listening for the answer for number 1, but the listening has got to number 3, 1 and 2 have already gone. Those answers have been said before. You need to jump to 3 and start working 3, 4, 5, okay? And let it go, okay? So there are some of my tips and some of the ways that you can improve in order to develop your student skills for Ielts. And the question that we asked ourselves, does Ielts and exams teaching differ from teaching general English? Yes, in my opinion, it does. So to conclude, when you're working with your students, make sure that you have the right balance of exam practice and the general English and language development. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm sorry that we weren't able to have our wonderful senior teacher, Imran Safour, join us, but I hope this has been a useful 25 minutes. And thank you very much. Allah Hafez.